The massive alien ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star made of metal and light. Its hull stretched 20 kilometers from tip to tail, casting shadows across entire cities as it moved. The ship's surface gleamed with a blue-white energy that made the air itself seem to hum with power. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the deck of the USS Intrepid, watching through reinforced windows as the alien vessel positioned itself in Earth's orbit. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, monitoring everything from radiation levels to gravitational disturbances. The alien ship was so massive it was actually affecting Earth's tides. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," Communications Officer Martinez called out, his voice tight with nervous energy. "It's on all frequencies, every language, every communication method we've ever used." Sarah nodded grimly. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and, suddenly, they were looking at something that defied easy description. The alien stood nearly 3 meters tall, with skin that seemed to shift between silver and deep purple. For arms extended from its torso, each ending in hands with 6 fingers. Its head was elongated, with large eyes that glowed with an inner light. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Greetings, humans of Earth," the alien said, its words somehow perfectly translated despite the obvious differences in anatomy. "I am Commander Zephix of the Celestial Guardians. We have traveled across the galaxy to bring you this message." Sarah felt her jaw clench. First contact with an alien species, and it was already sounding ominous. She'd read enough science fiction to know that when aliens showed up with messages, it usually wasn't good news. "We have been watching your species for many cycles," Commander Zephix continued. "We have observed your wars, your conflicts, your tendency toward violence and destruction. We have seen how you treat your own planet, how you pollute your air and water, how you drive other species to extinction." The alien paused, its glowing eyes seeming to look directly through the camera at every human watching. And Sarah knew that billions of people across Earth were watching this broadcast, holding their breath, waiting for whatever came next. Therefore, Commander Zephix announced, "The Celestial Guardians have made a decision. We will protect your planet and your species from yourselves. From this day forward, Earth is under our protection. We will prevent you from leaving your solar system until you have proven yourselves worthy of joining the galactic community." Sarah blinked. Protection? That was not what she'd expected. "We will establish monitoring stations throughout your solar system," the alien continued. "Any attempt to develop faster-than-light travel will be stopped. Any attempt to build weapons capable of destroying planets will be prevented. We will guide your development, nurture your growth, and ensure that you do not become a threat to the galaxy or to yourselves." The transmission continued for another 10 minutes, with Commander Zephix explaining the details of Earth's new, protected status. No human ship would be allowed beyond the orbit of Pluto. All nuclear weapons would be monitored and, if necessary, disabled. The Guardians would provide technology to help solve Earth's environmental problems, but only technologies they deemed safe and appropriate. When the transmission finally ended, the bridge of the Intrepid was silent for a long moment. Sarah stared at the blank screen, processing what she'd just heard. The aliens weren't here to conquer Earth or destroy humanity. They were here to babysit them. "Ma'am," Martinez asked quietly, "should I open a channel to Earth Command?" Sarah almost laughed. "Yes, do that." "And Martinez? Tell them we're going to need a bigger conference room." 3 hours later, Sarah found herself in the most surreal meeting of her life. Earth's leaders had gathered via holographic projection in the command center of the International Space Station. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists all talked at once, their voices creating a cacophony of disbelief, outrage, and confusion. "This is an invasion," shouted General Morrison from the Pentagon. "They're treating us like children." "Perhaps we should consider their offer," suggested Dr. Yamamoto from the Japanese Space Agency. "They clearly have technology far beyond ours. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already." "The question," interrupted President Williams, "is what do we do about it?" Sarah cleared her throat. "If I may, sir." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her holographic image. Sarah took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "I've been studying the alien ship's position and movements," she said. They've placed themselves in a perfect defensive position. High orbit, maximum visibility of all space traffic, positioned to intercept anything leaving Earth's atmosphere. From a military standpoint, it's brilliant. So we're trapped, General Morrison said grimly. Sarah smiled, and something in her expression made several people lean forward. That depends, sir, on how you define trapped. Explain, President Williams ordered. Sarah activated a holographic display showing Earth's solar system. They're monitoring for faster-than-light drives and planet-killing weapons. But they haven't said anything about conventional spacecraft, orbital construction, or even conventional weapons. They're not trying to stop our technological development, just specific types of technology they consider dangerous. Dr. Yamamoto nodded slowly. You're suggesting we continue our space program within their restrictions? I'm suggesting, Sarah said, that we take a very close look at what exactly they think they're protecting us from. And, more importantly, what they think they know about human nature. General Morrison frowned. What do you mean? Sarah's smile widened. Sir, in my experience, the best way to understand an opponent is to watch what they defend against. These Guardians are worried about us becoming a threat to the galaxy. They think we're violent, destructive, and dangerous. She paused. The question is, are they wrong? The meeting continued for hours, with arguments, debates, and heated discussions. But, gradually, a consensus began to emerge. The aliens had made a fundamental error in their understanding of humanity. They'd assumed that being protected meant being controlled. They'd assumed that humans would simply accept their new status as a protected species and be grateful for the guidance. They had clearly never met a human before. Over the following days, Earth's response began to take shape. Scientists pored over every word of the Guardian transmission, looking for loopholes and ambiguities. Engineers began designing new spacecraft that would comply with the letter of the alien restrictions while pushing every boundary they could find. Diplomats prepared for what would surely be a very interesting first contact negotiation. But, perhaps most importantly, ordinary humans around the world began to react to their new status as a protected species. And their reaction was not what Commander Zephyx had expected. Sarah watched the news feeds from around the globe as she worked in her laboratory aboard the space station. In Tokyo, protesters had gathered with signs reading, "We don't need babysitters," and "Human freedom now." In New York, a group of engineers had started a company called Unrestricted Technologies, and were openly recruiting anyone willing to work on creative solutions to galactic oversight. In London, a comedian had gone viral with a routine about alien social workers coming to check on humanity's progress. Next thing you know, he'd joked, they'll be telling us we can't stay up past midnight, or we'll lose our planet privileges. But it wasn't just jokes and protests. Around the world, humans were doing what humans did best when told they couldn't do something. They were finding ways to do it anyway. Sarah's own project was a perfect example. She was designing a new type of spacecraft engine that would be completely invisible to the Guardian sensors. Not because it was faster than light, that technology was still decades away, but because it would use a principle the aliens had apparently never considered: controlled quantum tunneling for sublight propulsion. The engine wouldn't break the alien restrictions, but it would make human spacecraft faster, more maneuverable, and harder to track than anything in Earth's current fleet. And, more importantly, it would prove a point. As Sarah worked, she couldn't help but think about Commander Zephyx's speech. The alien had talked about protecting humanity from itself, about guiding their development, about preventing them from becoming a threat to the galaxy. What the commander had failed to understand was that threats didn't always come in the form of planet-killing weapons or faster-than-light drives. Sometimes the biggest threat was simply refusing to be controlled. Sarah's communicator beeped, interrupting her thoughts. "Captain Chun to the bridge, please. We have incoming transmission from the Guardian ship." Sarah smiled as she headed for the bridge. Round 2 was about to begin. When she arrived, the main screen was already active, showing Commander Zephyx's imposing figure. The alien looked exactly as it had during the first transmission, but Sarah thought she detected something different in its glowing eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or concern. "Humans of Earth," Commander Zephyx began. "We have been monitoring your activities since our initial contact. We have observed protests, demonstrations, and what appears to be organized resistance to our protection. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew. Organized resistance. The aliens were already starting to sound defensive. We wish to clarify our intentions, the commander continued. We are not your conquerors or your oppressors. We are your protectors. Our restrictions are for your own good and for the safety of the galaxy. We have seen too many young species destroy themselves with premature technology. The alien paused, and when it spoke again, there was something almost pleading in its voice. We ask that you trust us. We have guided 17 other species to successful integration into the galactic community. We know what is best for developing civilizations. Please, accept our protection willingly. The transmission ended, and the bridge was quiet for a moment. Then, Martinez began to chuckle. Did that sound like begging to anyone else? Sarah nodded, her mind racing. The aliens were already backing down from their initial position. They'd gone from declaring protection to asking for cooperation. That meant they were either not as confident as they'd appeared, or they'd learned something about humans that had surprised them. Probably both. Martinez, open a channel to Earth Command, Sarah ordered. Tell them we need to accelerate our timeline. I think our new Guardians are about to discover something important about human nature. What's that, ma'am? Sarah grinned. That the only thing more dangerous than an unprotected human is a human who's been told they need protection. As the USS Intrepid continued its orbit around Earth, Sarah began to finalize her plans. The aliens thought they were dealing with a simple problem, a violent species that needed guidance and restrictions. They had no idea they were dealing with humans. And humans had never been very good at accepting simple solutions to complex problems. The real first contact was just beginning. 2 weeks after the Guardian Declaration, Commander Zephyx stood in the observation deck of the Eternal Vigil, staring down at the blue-green world below. The massive Guardian vessel maintained its perfect orbital position, sensors constantly sweeping for any signs of prohibited technology development. What those sensors were detecting, however, was not what Zephyx had expected. Commander, Subcommander Thyril approached with data tablets clutched in 3 of her 4 hands. The monitoring reports from Earth show unusual activity. Zephyx turned, his bioluminescent markings shifting to a concerned purple. Define unusual. Thyril consulted her tablets, her expression puzzled. The humans have increased their space-based construction activities by 300%. They've launched 47 new satellites in the past week alone. Their manufacturing output has doubled. And, sir, they're building something large in orbit around their moon. Weapons? Zephyx asked immediately. No, sir. That's what makes it unusual. None of the construction projects show any signs of prohibited technologies. No faster-than-light drives, no planet-killing weapons, no dimensional manipulation devices. Everything they're building appears to be completely within our established parameters. Zephyx's markings shifted to a confused orange. In his 3 centuries of Guardian service, he'd overseen the protection of 17 different species. Usually, when the Guardians arrived, there was an initial period of shock, followed by acceptance, followed by gradual integration into the galactic community under Guardian supervision. The humans were following none of that pattern. What about the protests? Zephyx asked. Our cultural analysts reported widespread demonstrations against our protection. Yes, sir, but they've changed. Thyril activated a holographic display showing footage from Earth. Look at this. The display showed a massive gathering in what the humans called Times Square. Thousands of people filled the streets, but instead of angry protesters, they were laughing. Zephyx watched in bewilderment as humans held up signs with messages like, "Thanks for caring," and "Galaxy's best babysitters." One human had dressed up in what appeared to be a crude mockery of Guardian armor and was pretending to scold other humans for staying up past their bedtime. The crowd was roaring with laughter. They're mocking us? Zephyx asked. It appears so, sir. But not in an angry way. They seem to find our protection amusing. Zephyx's markings flickered through several colors as he processed this information. In all his experience, no protected species had ever responded to Guardian intervention with amusement. Fear, yes. Anger, occasionally. Gratitude, eventually. But never laughter. Sir, there's more. Thyril changed the display to show a human news broadcast. A female human with short dark hair sat behind a desk, speaking to the camera with what appeared to be barely controlled mirth. This is Diana Rodriguez with Earth Global News. In a related story, the European Space Agency announced today that their new Guardian-compliant Starship design has been approved for construction. The ship, which they're calling the Please Don't Ground Us, will be powered entirely by conventional fusion drives and armed with nothing more dangerous than harsh language and strongly worded diplomatic notes. The human paused, clearly struggling not to laugh. When asked about the ship's mission, ESA Director Martinez stated, and I quote, "We're planning a really slow trip to Alpha Centauri. Should only take us about 40,000 years. We're packing snacks." Zefix stared at the display. Are they making fun of our restrictions? It gets worse, sir. Thyral switched to another broadcast, this one from North America. A human male in what appeared to be a military uniform stood before a crowd of reporters. The United States Space Force is pleased to announce the development of our new, totally harmless weapons platform, the human said with a completely straight face. The platform is equipped with conventional missiles, conventional lasers, and conventional railguns, all of which are completely incapable of destroying planets. At most, they might blow up a mountain or level a city, but, as our Guardian protectors have made clear, that's apparently perfectly acceptable. The reporters in the audience were asking questions, but many of them seemed to be struggling not to laugh. General Morrison, one reporter called out, "How effective will these totally harmless weapons be?" The general shrugged. "Well, they can't destroy planets, but they can probably handle anything else you might want to throw them at. Asteroid mining, deep space construction, aggressive neighbors." He paused meaningfully. "Large ships in Earth orbit, hypothetically speaking." Zefix's bioluminescent markings went completely white with shock. "Are they threatening us?" Thyral shook her head. "Not exactly, sir. Our analysts believe they're establishing what they call plausible deniability. They're not violating our restrictions, but they're making it very clear that they don't consider themselves defenseless." "But why?" Zefix asked. "We're here to protect them. We're offering them guidance, technology, safety." "Sir, I think that might be the problem." Zefix turned to face his subcommander. "Explain." Thyral hesitated for a moment, then activated another display. This one showed a compilation of human communications from across their global network. Our translation algorithms have been analyzing human discourse since our arrival. The most common emotional responses to our protection seem to be indignation and offense. They don't want to be protected? Sir, it appears that humans consider the ability to make their own mistakes to be a fundamental right. Zefix stared at her. That's illogical. Making mistakes leads to suffering and failure. Yes, sir. Humans seem to prefer that to being told what to do by aliens they've never met. Before Zefix could respond, the ship's communication system activated. "Commander, incoming transmission from Earth." It's being broadcast on all their communication networks simultaneously. "Display it," Zefix ordered. The screen flickered, and, suddenly, they were looking at a human female sitting behind a wooden desk. She appeared to be in some kind of government building, based on the flags and formal decorations visible behind her. "Greetings, Commander Zefix, and the crew of the Guardian vessel," the human said. Her voice was calm, professional, but there was something in her eyes that reminded Zefix uncomfortably of a predator. "I'm President Williams of the United Earth Council. We appreciate your recent visit and your offer of protection." Zefix felt his markings shift nervously. Something about the human's tone suggested that appreciation wasn't quite the right word. "We've given your proposal considerable thought," President Williams continued, "and we have some questions. First, what exactly qualifies the Guardians to determine what's best for humanity? Second, what gives you the right to restrict our development without our consent? And third, what makes you think we need protection from ourselves?" The human paused, and her expression became almost friendly. "Almost. You see, Commander, humans have been protecting ourselves for quite some time now. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and each other. We've built civilizations, developed technology, and explored our solar system. We've made mistakes, certainly, but we've learned from them. And, most importantly, we've done it all ourselves." President Williams leaned forward slightly. "So when you arrive and tell us that we're too dangerous to be trusted with our own future. Well, that strikes us as presumptuous. Zefix's markings were now cycling rapidly through various shades of confusion and concern. This wasn't how protected species were supposed to respond. Now, we're not ungrateful for your concern, the human continued. And we're certainly impressed by your technology and your good intentions. But here's the thing about humans, Commander. We don't like being told what we can and cannot do, especially by people we've never voted for. The human smiled, and Zefix suddenly understood why humans were considered a dangerous species. So here's what we propose, President Williams said. You can keep your ships in our solar system if you want. You can monitor our activities and offer advice when asked. But you cannot restrict our development or prevent us from exploring space. If you try to enforce your restrictions, you'll discover that humans can be very creative when it comes to working around obstacles. The transmission paused for a moment, and when President Williams spoke again, her voice was steel-wrapped in silk. Commander, you've spent centuries protecting species from themselves. But you've never protected a species that didn't want protection. You're about to learn the difference. The transmission ended, leaving Zefix staring at a blank screen. Around the bridge, his crew stood in stunned silence. Sir, Thyrol said quietly, what do we do? Zefix didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the 17 species he'd helped guide to galactic citizenship. All of them had been grateful for Guardian protection. All of them had accepted restrictions on their development. All of them had been happy to let the Guardians make decisions for their future. None of them had been human. Commander, another officer called from the sensor station. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the construction site near Earth's moon. What kind of signatures? Unknown, sir. Whatever they're building, it's not using any technology in our databases. Zefix felt a chill run through his bioluminescent markings. Is it faster than light capable? No, sir. But, sir, it's big. Really big. And it's definitely not a scientific research station. Zefix moved to the sensor station and studied the readouts. The humans were indeed building something massive in lunar orbit. The structure was already over 2 kilometers long and still growing. More importantly, it was clearly designed for some kind of industrial purpose. What are they doing? He murmured. His answer came 3 days later when the human construction project went online. It wasn't a weapon exactly. It wasn't a faster-than-light drive. It was something the Guardians had never encountered before and had therefore never thought to restrict. It was a mass driver. An electromagnetic launching system capable of accelerating objects to significant fractions of light speed using nothing but conventional physics and a lot of power. The first projectile the humans launched was small, harmless, and aimed at empty space. It was also moving at 12% of light speed, which meant it packed the kinetic energy of several nuclear weapons. The second projectile was launched an hour later. Also harmless. Also aimed at empty space. Also moving at 12% of light speed. The message was clear. The humans had just demonstrated that they could build planet-killing weapons using nothing but high school physics and really good engineering. And, according to the Guardian's own restrictions, there was nothing they could do to stop it. Zefix stood in his command center, staring at the tactical display that showed the locations of 43 active mass drivers the humans had built in the past month. Each one was perfectly legal according to Guardian restrictions. Each one was capable of devastating any target in the solar system. Sir, Thyrol said quietly. Incoming message from Earth. The display activated to show President Williams again. She was smiling. Commander Zefix, we hope you enjoyed the demonstration. As promised, we haven't violated any of your restrictions. No faster-than-light drives, no exotic physics, nothing that could threaten the galaxy. Just good old-fashioned kinetic energy. The human smile widened. Now, we believe it's time for a proper negotiation. One sovereign species to another. We suggest you send a diplomatic team to Earth for discussions about the future of human-Guardian relations. President Williams paused, and, when she spoke again, her voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone who was holding all the cards. After all, Commander, we wouldn't want you to think we're hostile. That would be very unfortunate for everyone involved. The transmission ended, and Zefix found himself facing a situation no Guardian commander had ever faced before, a protected species that refused to be protected. And Worse, they'd just proven they didn't need protection. Zephix's markings settled into a resigned blue as he turned to Thyrol. Prepare a diplomatic shuttle. It seems we need to have a conversation with the humans. Yes, sir. What should I tell the Galactic Council? Zephix considered that question for a long moment. How do you explain to your superiors that you'd encountered a species that considered protection an insult and restrictions a challenge? Tell them, he said finally, that the humans would like to discuss the terms of their membership in the galactic community. As equals. Thyrol's markings flickered with confusion. But, sir, they're not ready for membership. They haven't completed the protection process. Zephix looked back at the tactical display showing those 43 mass drivers, each one pointed at strategic locations throughout the solar system. Each one a reminder that humans didn't solve problems the way other species did. I'm beginning to think, he said slowly, that humans don't need the protection process. And, more importantly, they've just demonstrated that whether they're ready or not, they're not going to wait for our permission. As the Eternal Vigil adjusted its orbit to prepare for the diplomatic mission, Zephix found himself wondering what other assumptions about human nature he was about to have shattered. He had a feeling he was about to find out. The Guardian diplomatic shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling jewel, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight into spectacular prismatic displays. Commander Zephix watched through the viewport as they approached what the humans called Geneva, Switzerland. Below, he could see the massive complex where Earth's leaders had gathered for what was being called the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. Sir, Subcommander Thyrol said from the pilot station, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the meeting location. Weapons? Zephix asked, his markings shifting to an alert amber. No, sir. It appears to be recording equipment. Massive amounts of it. The humans seem to be broadcasting this meeting to their entire planet. Zephix's markings flickered with confusion. They're making our diplomatic negotiations public? Yes, sir. Our intelligence suggests that humans have a tradition of transparency in important governmental decisions. But diplomatic negotiations require secrecy, privacy, the ability to speak freely without public pressure. Sir, I don't think the humans see it that way. As their shuttle touched down on the landing pad outside the Geneva Convention Center, Zephix could see crowds of humans gathered beyond the security barriers. They weren't angry crowds. Mostly they seemed curious, excited. Some were even cheering and waving. A few held signs with messages like, Welcome to Earth, and Let's talk this out. But there were other signs too. Equal partners or no deal, and Earth speaks for itself, and, somewhat ominously, we have lawyers. Commander, the shuttle's communication system crackled to life. This is Geneva Control. You're cleared for landing. A human diplomatic escort is waiting to meet you. Zephix straightened his ceremonial robes and checked that his translation device was functioning properly. In 3 centuries of Guardian service, he'd conducted hundreds of diplomatic meetings with developing species. This should be no different. Except that everything about the humans suggested it would be completely different. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and Zephix stepped onto the surface of an alien world for the first time in his career. Usually, Guardian diplomacy was conducted aboard Guardian vessels, with the protected species coming to them. But President Williams had politely insisted that since this was Earth, the meeting should take place on Earth. A group of humans approached the shuttle. Zephix recognized President Williams from the transmissions, but she was accompanied by a diverse group of individuals who represented, according to his briefing materials, different regions and governments of Earth. Commander Zephix, President Williams said, stepping forward with what Zephix was learning to recognize as a diplomatic smile. Welcome to Earth. I hope your journey was comfortable. Thank you, Madam President, Zephix replied, his translation device rendering his words into the human language called English. I appreciate your hospitality. Please, call me Sarah. And these are my colleagues. She gestured to the other humans. Premier Chun from the Asian Coalition, Chancellor Okafor from the African Union, Prime Minister Petrov from the European Federation, and Secretary General Martinez from the Americas Alliance. Zephix nodded to each human in turn, noting that they all seemed remarkably calm for representatives of a species meeting aliens for the first time. I am honored to meet you all. The honor is ours, said Chancellor Okafor, a tall woman with kind eyes and what Zephyx was learning to recognize as a very sharp intelligence. Shall we proceed inside? I believe we have much to discuss. As they walked toward the convention center, Zephyx couldn't help but notice the human reporters following them with cameras and recording equipment. Is it customary for humans to make diplomatic negotiations public? President Williams, Sarah, smiled. Commander, I think you'll find that humans do many things that aren't customary. Democracy, for instance, requires that our citizens know what their governments are doing, especially when those decisions affect the future of our entire species. They entered a large conference room with windows overlooking Lake Geneva. The room was arranged with a circular table, no head, no clear position of authority, with comfortable chairs for both humans and Zephyx's taller frame. Video screens lined the walls, showing feeds from news networks around the world. Commander, Premier Chen said as they took their seats, before we begin, we want you to know that this conversation is being broadcast live to every nation on Earth. Our citizens have a right to hear what's being discussed about their future. Zephyx's markings shifted to a concerned purple. That's highly irregular. Diplomatic negotiations require discretion, the ability to speak freely. Commander, Secretary General Martinez interrupted gently. With respect, you're not negotiating with a government. You're negotiating with humanity, all of humanity. And we believe our people deserve to hear what you have to say. Zephyx looked around the table at the 5 human leaders. They all wore the same expression of polite determination. It occurred to him that this was their way of saying that they weren't going to negotiate behind closed doors while their people remained ignorant. Very well, Zephyx said finally. Though I should warn you that some aspects of galactic politics can be complex. Prime Minister Petrov leaned forward. Commander, we've been dealing with complex politics for thousands of years. We think we can handle it. Zephyx activated his holographic display, showing a map of the local galactic region. Then, let me explain the situation. The Galactic Council consists of 47 member species, all of which have achieved faster-than-light travel and demonstrated sufficient maturity to be trusted with advanced technology. He highlighted several star systems. Each member species went through a protection period under Guardian oversight. During this time, we helped them resolve internal conflicts, develop sustainable technologies, and prepare for integration into the galactic community. How long does this protection period typically last? Chancellor Okafor asked. On average, 3 to 5 centuries. The humans exchanged glances. Sarah cleared her throat. Commander, you mentioned that you've guided 17 species through this process. How many of those species had nuclear weapons when you arrived? Zephyx consulted his data pad. 14 of them. And how many had explored their solar systems? All of them, to some degree. Premier Chen leaned forward. How many had established democratic governments covering their entire planet? Zephyx paused. None of them. Most were still divided into competing nation-states or tribal confederations. The humans exchanged another look, and Zephyx was beginning to recognize that look. It was the expression of beings who had just realized they held better cards than their opponent thought. Commander, Secretary General Martinez said carefully, it sounds like humanity might be somewhat ahead of the curve compared to your previous protectees. Perhaps, Zephyx admitted. But advancement in technology and governance doesn't necessarily indicate emotional or psychological maturity. Sarah smiled, and Zephyx was really beginning to dislike that smile. Commander, what makes you think we lack emotional or psychological maturity? Zephyx activated another display, this one showing footage from human history. Your species has a documented history of warfare spanning millennia. You've developed weapons capable of destroying your own planet. You've demonstrated territorial aggression, resource competition, and tribal thinking that. Commander, Prime Minister Petrov interrupted. When was your last major war? Zephyx's markings flickered with confusion. I don't understand the relevance. When did your species last fight a large-scale military conflict? The Guardian Pacification Wars ended approximately 8,000 years ago. Chancellor Okafor leaned back in her chair. And how long did those wars last? Nearly 2 millennia. The humans were quiet for a moment. Then, Premier Chen spoke. Commander, humanity's last global conflict ended 80 years ago. Since then, we've established international law, created global institutions for conflict resolution, and developed economic systems that make war increasingly unprofitable. But you still have military forces, Zefix pointed out. You still develop weapons. Yes, Sarah agreed. Because we've learned that the best way to prevent war is to be prepared for it. But we've also learned that the best way to end wars is through negotiation, compromise, and mutual benefit. She gestured to the conference room around them. This meeting, for instance. You arrived with overwhelming technological superiority and announced that you were taking control of our development. A less mature species might have either submitted completely or launched suicidal attacks against your ships. Secretary General Martinez nodded. Instead, we demonstrated our capabilities without attacking anyone, opened diplomatic channels, and invited you to Earth for negotiations among equals. Zefix's markings were cycling through colors rapidly as he processed this information. You're suggesting that your response to Guardian protection demonstrates maturity? We're suggesting, Chancellor Okafor said, that your definition of maturity might be incomplete. Zefix looked around the table at the 5 human leaders. Explain. Sarah activated a holographic display of her own, showing data about Earth. Commander, in the past century, humanity has reduced global poverty by 80%, increased literacy from 30% to 97%, and extended human lifespan by 40 years. We've done this while maintaining a global population of 8 billion individuals across dozens of different cultures, languages, and belief systems. Premier Chen added, we've established international laws governing everything from trade to environmental protection to human rights. We have global institutions that resolve disputes between nations without warfare. And when those institutions fail, Secretary General Martinez continued, we have backup systems, regional organizations, bilateral treaties, economic incentives for cooperation. Prime Minister Petrov leaned forward. Commander, how many species achieve global cooperation before developing faster-than-light travel? Zefix consulted his datapad, his markings shifting to a worried orange. None. Most species achieve galactic citizenship precisely because Guardian protection forces them to develop these capabilities. So, Chancellor Okafor said quietly, humanity has achieved in decades what your protection process usually takes centuries to accomplish. The conference room was silent for a moment as Zefix processed this information. Outside, he could see crowds of humans gathered around public viewing screens, watching the negotiations with intense interest. No species he'd encountered had ever made their diplomatic processes so public. Commander, Sarah said gently, I think we need to discuss the elephant in the room. Elephant, a human expression, the obvious issue that no one wants to address directly. Sarah's expression became serious. You said you're here to protect us from becoming a threat to the galaxy. But, Commander, what if we don't want to threaten the galaxy? What if we want to join it? Zefix's markings went still. That would require galactic citizenship, which requires completing the protection process. No, Premier Chen said firmly. That would require demonstrating that we meet the qualifications for galactic citizenship, which, based on everything we've discussed, we might already do. Secretary General Martinez activated his own display. Commander, we've been doing some research since your arrival. According to the information in your initial broadcast, galactic citizenship requires 3 things: faster-than-light travel capability, planetary governmental unity, and demonstrated responsibility with advanced technology. Zefix nodded. That's correct. We don't have faster-than-light travel yet, Martinez continued, but our scientists believe we're within decades of developing it independently. We don't have planetary governmental unity in the traditional sense, but we have something you've apparently never seen: functional international cooperation between independent nations. Chancellor Okafor picked up the thread. And, as for responsibility with advanced technology, Commander, we've had the ability to destroy our own planet for 80 years. We've chosen not to. Prime Minister Petrov leaned forward. In fact, we've used our most dangerous technologies to solve problems. Nuclear power provides clean energy. Chemical weapons have been banned by international treaty. Biological research is regulated by global protocols. Sarah stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the lake. Commander, I think your protection process is designed for species that need to be taught responsibility, cooperation, and restraint. Humanity has already learned these lessons. She turned back to face the table. The question isn't whether we're ready for galactic citizenship. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for humanity. Zephyx stared at her, his bioluminescent markings cycling through colors he didn't have names for. In 3 centuries of Guardian service, no protected species had ever challenged the fundamental assumptions of the protection process itself. Commander, Chancellor Okafor said quietly, what happens if a species refuses protection but demonstrates they meet the qualifications for galactic citizenship? Zephyx's markings went completely still. That has never happened. Then, Sarah said, returning to her seat, I think we're about to make history. She looked directly at Zephyx, and her expression was neither hostile nor submissive. It was the look of an equal negotiating with another equal. Commander, humanity formally requests immediate consideration for galactic citizenship. We believe we meet all the qualifications except faster-than-light travel, which we're prepared to develop independently within the next 50 years. And if the Galactic Council refuses? Zephyx asked. Sarah smiled. And this time it wasn't diplomatic or polite. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized it was stronger than it looked. Then, Commander, I think the galaxy is going to discover what happens when you try to cage a species that's already outgrown its cage. Outside the conference room windows, the crowds of humans watching the broadcast erupted in cheers. And Zephyx began to understand that he wasn't just dealing with a diplomatic negotiation. He was witnessing the birth of a new kind of galactic power. The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive crystalline structure that served as neutral ground for the 47-member species of the galactic community. Commander Zephyx stood in the central speaking circle, surrounded by representatives from across the galaxy, each more alien than the last. High Counselor Vrex of the Zafrani hegemony dominated the chamber with his 15-meter wingspan and scales that shifted color with his emotions. Currently, those scales were a deep purple that indicated skepticism mixed with irritation. Guardian Commander Zephyx, High Counselor Vrex's voice boomed through the chamber's translation matrix. You're telling this council that a pre-FTL species has refused protection and demanded immediate citizenship? Yes, High Counselor, Zephyx replied, his own bioluminescent markings carefully controlled to show respectful attention. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that suggest they may not require the standard protection process. A chittering sound filled the chamber as Ambassador Clixie of the Hive Collective expressed what Zephyx recognized as amusement. The insectoid species spoke through harmonized clicks that the translation matrix rendered as words. Commander Zephyx has been in space too long, Clixie said. No species develops proper social responsibility without guardian oversight. It is simply not possible. The humans beg to differ, Zephyx replied quietly. Madam Speaker THYSS of the Serpentine Concordat uncoiled her impressive length and slithered closer to the speaking circle. Her species had achieved galactic citizenship only 2 centuries ago, making them one of the newer members. Guardian Zephyx, what exactly have these humans done that makes you think they're ready for citizenship? Zephyx activated his holographic display, showing the data he'd compiled during his weeks of observation. They've achieved global cooperation while maintaining cultural diversity. They've demonstrated restraint with planet-killing technology. They've established legal frameworks for international dispute resolution. And, most importantly, they've proven capable of rapid technological advancement without losing social stability. Impossible, declared Counselor Vorth of the Titanide Republic, his crystal body resonating with harmonic disbelief. Social stability requires centuries of careful guidance. Our own species required 400 years under guardian protection, as did mine. Agreed Elder Morphos of the Shifting Dominion, his amorphous form rippling with emphasis. The idea that a species could achieve such development independently is unprecedented. High Counselor Vrex's scales shifted to an aggressive red. Commander Zephyx, show us proof of this alleged maturity. Zephyx hesitated for a moment, then activated a new display showing recent human activities. 3 days ago, the humans detected an asteroid on a collision course with their planet. The asteroid was large enough to cause significant damage to one of their major landmasses. And? Counselor Vorth asked. They deflected it using coordinated mass driver strikes from 17 different orbital platforms. The operation required precise timing, international cooperation, and the kind of advanced calculation that most species don't achieve until after galactic citizenship. That proves technological capability. Ambassador Clixie chittered dismissively. Not social responsibility. The asteroid was deflected to a stable orbit around their moon, Zephyx continued. They're planning to mine it for rare metals using international crews and sharing the profits according to a treaty they negotiated and signed within 48 hours. The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient hum of the station's life support systems seemed muted. They negotiated a resource-sharing treaty in 2 days? Elder Morphos asked, his form shifting to express astonishment. Including environmental protection protocols, worker safety standards, and profit distribution formulas that account for technological contribution, financial investment, and political risk, Zephyx confirmed. Madam Speaker THYSS coiled more tightly, a sign of deep thought among her species. How is that possible? According to the humans, they've had practice. They've been negotiating similar agreements for decades. High Counselor Vrex's scales had shifted to an orange that indicated confusion mixed with concern. Commander, are you suggesting that these humans have developed post-scarcity economic models? Not post-scarcity, exactly, Zephyx replied. But they've developed systems that make resource conflicts increasingly unlikely and cooperation increasingly profitable. Show us, Counselor Vorth demanded. Zephyx activated another display, this one showing human economic data. 60 years ago, the humans were fighting wars over access to fossil fuels. Today, they've transitioned to renewable energy sources and have established global protocols for sharing advanced energy technologies. Impossible, Ambassador Clixie chittered. No species voluntarily shares advanced technology without coercion. The humans call it enlightened self-interest, Zephyx explained. They've discovered that sharing certain technologies benefits everyone, including the sharers. Examples? Elder Morphos asked. Medical research is shared globally through open-access databases. Climate mitigation technologies are freely available to all nations. Space exploration is conducted through international partnerships that share both costs and benefits. High Counselor Vrex stood to his full impressive height. Commander Zephyx, what you're describing sounds like a species that has achieved post-scarcity thinking without post-scarcity technology. Yes, High Counselor. That's exactly what I'm describing. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds as representatives from 47 species all tried to speak at once. Zephyx waited for the chaos to subside, knowing that what he was about to say next would make things even more complicated. There's more, he said finally. The chamber fell silent again. The humans have made it clear that if the Galactic Council refuses their citizenship application, they intend to develop faster-than-light travel independently and establish their own interstellar civilization. They can't do that. Ambassador Clixie chittered frantically. Unguided FTL development is chaotic, dangerous. They don't see it that way, Zephyx replied. They view FTL travel as a scientific challenge to be solved through research and experimentation. Madam Speaker THYSS uncoiled completely, a sign of extreme alarm. Commander, surely you've explained to them the dangers of uncontrolled FTL expansion? I have. They thanked me for the information and said they'd take appropriate precautions. What does that mean? Counselor Vorth asked. Zephyx activated yet another display, this one showing human space activities over the past month. They've established automated monitoring stations throughout their solar system to detect any negative effects of FTL experimentation. They've created international protocols for safe FTL research. And they've begun training diplomatic corps for eventual contact with other species. The chamber was dead silent for a long moment. They're preparing for galactic contact whether we approve it or not, Elder Morphos said quietly. Yes, Zephyx confirmed. The humans have made it clear that they consider galactic citizenship their right, not a privilege to be granted by others. High Counselor Vrex's scales had shifted to a deep blue that indicated fear mixed with respect. Commander, in your professional opinion, what will happen if we deny their application? Zephyx had been dreading this question, but he'd spent weeks considering the answer. High Counselor, The humans will achieve FTL travel within 50 years regardless of our decision. If we accept their citizenship application, we can guide their integration into the galactic community and benefit from their unique perspectives and capabilities. And if we refuse, then, in 50 years, we'll find ourselves dealing with a technologically advanced, economically sophisticated, and politically unified species that has no reason to respect our authority or follow our protocols. Ambassador Clixey's chittering had taken on a nervous quality. Surely they wouldn't be hostile to established galactic civilization? Not hostile, exactly, Zephix said. But they've made it clear that they don't recognize anyone's authority to restrict their development without their consent. Counselor Vortha's crystal body was resonating with what Zephix recognized as deep concern. Are you saying they would challenge the entire galactic order? I'm saying they would ignore it, Zephix replied. The humans have demonstrated a remarkable ability to work around obstacles rather than confronting them directly. High Counselor Vrex began pacing, his massive wingspan creating air currents throughout the chamber. Give us a concrete example. Zephix had hoped to avoid this topic, but the council needed to understand what they were dealing with. 3 weeks ago, I informed the humans that their mass driver weapons violated the spirit of our restrictions on planet-killing devices. What was their response? They said they were sorry I felt that way. And then, they built 47 more mass drivers and began experimenting with asteroid mining techniques that coincidentally demonstrate the ability to redirect large objects with pinpoint accuracy. The chamber erupted again, but this time the sounds were clearly expressions of alarm and concern. They're weaponizing their entire solar system. Madam Speaker THYSS exclaimed. No, Zephix corrected. They're industrializing it. The weapon's capability is just a side effect they're happy to let everyone know about. Elder Morphos's form was shifting rapidly, indicating extreme agitation. Commander, how many humans are involved in these projects? All of them. What do you mean, all of them? I mean their entire species is participating in rapid technological development. 8 billion humans working together with unified purpose and shared resources. The chamber fell silent again as the representatives processed this information. Most galactic species had populations in the millions. Even the largest member species had only a few billion individuals, and most of those were not involved in advanced technological development. High Counselor Vrex stopped pacing and turned to face Zephix directly. Commander, what exactly are you recommending? Zephix had spent weeks preparing for this moment. High Counselor, I recommend that the Galactic Council grant humanity immediate provisional citizenship with a 50-year timeline for full citizenship contingent on successful FTL development. That's unprecedented. Ambassador Clixey chittered. So are the humans, Zephix replied. Counselor Vortha's crystalline structure was resonating with what might have been laughter. Commander, even if we agreed to this unprecedented arrangement, what makes you think the humans would accept provisional status? Because I already asked them. The chamber went dead silent. You already asked them? High Counselor Vrex's voice was barely above a whisper. President Williams said, and I quote, that sounds reasonable. We appreciate the galaxy's willingness to be flexible. We'll do our best not to disappoint you. That's it, Elder Morphos asked. Then, she smiled and said they were looking forward to contributing to galactic civilization. Madam Speaker THYSS coiled herself into a tight spiral, a defensive posture. Commander, what aren't you telling us? Zephix's bioluminescent markings flickered with resignation. The humans have invited the Galactic Council to send a permanent embassy to Earth. They want to establish formal diplomatic relations and begin cultural exchanges immediately. Before citizenship is approved? Counselor Vorth asked. They said they assumed we were reasonable beings who could work out the details as we went along. Ambassador Clixey's chittering had become almost frantic. Commander, these humans sound like they're treating the galactic community as equals. Yes, Zephix said quietly. That's exactly what they're doing. High Counselor Vrex's scales had shifted to a color Zephix had never seen before, something between gold and silver that seemed to shimmer with possibility. Commander Zephix, the High Counselor said slowly, I think the Galactic Council needs to have a very serious discussion about the future of our civilization. As the council chamber erupted into the chaotic sounds of 47 species, all trying to process the same impossible reality, Zephyx found himself thinking about his last conversation with President Williams. "Commander," she'd said, "we understand that this is new territory for everyone. But humans have always believed that the best way to solve new problems is to work together. We're hoping the galaxy feels the same way." Looking around at the panicking representatives of 47 species, Zephyx wondered if the galaxy was ready for that kind of cooperation. But, ready or not, humanity was coming. 5 years later, Commander Zephyx stood on the observation deck of the New Horizons, the first human-designed faster-than-light vessel. The ship was a joint project between human engineers and Galactic Council scientists, and it represented everything that made humans different from every other species the galaxy had ever encountered. Instead of the sleek, uniform designs favored by most galactic civilizations, the New Horizons looked like it had been built by a committee of enthusiastic inventors. The hull incorporated Zafrani energy-dampening scales, crystallized resonance chambers, and human mass driver technology in a configuration that should have been impossible, but somehow worked better than anything in the galactic fleet. "It's magnificent," said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the human chief engineer who had led the design team. She was a small woman with graying hair and eyes that sparkled with the kind of intellectual curiosity that Zephyx had learned to associate with humans. "Chaotic, but magnificent. How is it possible that this design is 30% more efficient than our best ships?" Zephyx asked, genuinely puzzled. Dr. Rodriguez grinned. "Because we didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. When you told us about Zafrani energy-dampening technology, we didn't think that's how the Zafrani solved that problem. We thought, that's an interesting solution. What other solutions are there?" She gestured at the viewport showing the ship's exterior. "So we combined Zafrani dampening fields with crystallized resonance chambers to create a hybrid system that's more efficient than either technology alone. Then, we added our mass driver technology to create a 3-stage propulsion system that violates several fundamental principles of FDL engineering," Zephyx finished. "Only if you assume those principles are limitations instead of guidelines," Dr. Rodriguez replied cheerfully. Zephyx's markings shifted to an amused blue. After 5 years of working with humans, he learned that they had a fundamentally different relationship with the word impossible than any other species he'd encountered. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw challenges to be solved. "Commander," the ship's communication system activated. "Incoming transmission from Earth." "It's President Chun." "Display it," Zephyx ordered. The main screen activated to show President Chun, who had succeeded Sarah Williams 2 years ago. Behind her, Zephyx could see the familiar blue-white curve of Earth, but the view also showed something that still amazed him: a massive orbital complex that housed the Galactic Embassy, where representatives from all 47 member species lived and worked alongside human diplomats. "Commander Zephyx," Dr. Rodriguez, President Chun said with a warm smile. "I hope the test flight is going well." "Better than expected, Madam President," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "The hybrid FTL system is performing at 130% of design specifications." "Excellent. Commander, the Galactic Council has asked me to inform you that they've reached a decision regarding humanity's full citizenship application." Zephyx felt his markings shift with anticipation. The humans had achieved faster-than-light travel 3 years ahead of schedule, but the Galactic Council had taken its time deliberating on the implications of human membership. "The vote was unanimous," President Chun continued, and Zephyx could see that she was trying not to smile too broadly. "The Galactic Council formally recognizes humanity as the 48th member species of the galactic community." Dr. Rodriguez whooped with joy, a very human expression of celebration. Zephyx's markings shifted to a brilliant gold, the guardian equivalent of happiness. "There is one condition," President Chun added, and both Zephyx and Dr. Rodriguez sobered. "What kind of condition?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. President Chin's smile became slightly mischievous. "The Galactic Council has asked humanity to serve as the primary coordinators for first contact with newly discovered species." Zephyx stared at the screen, his markings cycling through colors of confusion. "They want humans to take over guardian responsibilities?" "Not exactly," President Chin replied. They want humans to develop new protocols for integrating species that might not fit the traditional protection model. The implications hit Zephyx like a photon storm. They're expecting to find more species like humans? Actually, Commander, it's even more interesting than that. President Chen activated a holographic display showing galactic survey data. Now that we know what to look for, the Council's xenobiologists have identified 17 species that achieved rapid technological development without significant warfare, 12 species that developed global cooperation before space travel, and 6 species that achieved sustainable resource management before developing FTL capability. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, fascinated. You mean there are other species like humans? We mean, President Chun said, that humans might not be as unusual as we thought. We might just be the first species of our type to catch the galaxy's attention. Zephyx's markings were now cycling through the entire spectrum as he processed this information. How is that possible? The Guardian protocols have been in place for millennia. Commander, that's exactly the problem, President Chen replied gently. The Guardian protocols work perfectly for species that need extensive guidance and protection, but they might actually discourage rapid development in species that are capable of it. What do you mean? Dr. Rodriguez answered. Commander, what would have happened if you'd arrived on Earth 200 years ago and offered us protection? Zephyx considered the question. You would have accepted it gratefully and developed more slowly but more safely under Guardian guidance. Exactly, President Chen said. We would have become dependent on Guardian technology instead of developing our own solutions. We would have learned to think like the galaxy instead of thinking like humans. The implications were staggering. Zephyx realized that the Guardian protection system, designed to prevent dangerous technological development, might also prevent the kind of rapid, innovative development that made humans unique. The Council believes, President Chun continued, that there may be many species capable of rapid, safe development who were never given the chance because the Guardians arrived too early in their development cycle. So they want humans to develop new first contact protocols, Dr. Rodriguez said thoughtfully. Protocols that identify species that might benefit from freedom rather than protection. More than that, President Chen said. The Council wants humans to serve as mentors and partners for species that show human-like development patterns. Zephyx felt a strange sensation he was beginning to recognize as pride. The galaxy wants to learn from humanity. The galaxy wants to become more like humanity, President Chen corrected. More innovative, more cooperative, more resilient. The communication ended, leaving Zephyx and Dr. Rodriguez alone on the observation deck of humanity's first starship. Below them, through the ship's transparent aluminum deck plates, they could see stars streaming past at faster-than-light speeds, a sight that humans had achieved through cooperation, innovation, and sheer stubbornness. Commander, Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course. 5 years ago, when you first arrived at Earth, what did you expect to happen? Zephyx's markings shifted to a thoughtful purple as he considered the question. I expected you to accept our protection, develop slowly and safely under our guidance, and eventually become productive members of galactic civilization. Like the other 17 species you'd guided? Exactly like them. Dr. Rodriguez nodded. And now? Zephyx looked out at the stars, thinking about the past 5 years. He thought about human mass drivers that made warfare obsolete through mutual assured destruction. He thought about human diplomatic protocols that turned first contact into a negotiation between equals. He thought about human engineering that solved problems by refusing to accept that they were problems. Now, he said finally, I think the galaxy is about to discover what happens when you give an innovative species room to grow. Are you worried? Zephyx's markings shifted to a brilliant gold. Dr. Rodriguez, I'm terrified. And I can't wait to see what happens next. 6 months later, the first human-led first contact mission departed for the Kepler 442 system, where a species called the Aquarians had developed faster-than-light travel without ever fighting a planetary war. The mission was jointly crewed by humans, Zephrani, crystallides, and 3 other species, all working together to establish contact with a civilization that, like humanity, had developed too quickly for traditional Guardian protection. The Aquarians welcomed the contact team with curiosity rather than fear, cooperation rather than submission. Within a week, they had established trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and joint research initiatives. Within a month, they had developed new technologies that none of the contact team species had imagined. Within a year, they had become the 49th member of the galactic community. The pattern repeated itself across the galaxy as human-led contact teams encountered species after species that had been developing in isolation, achieving technological and social advancement without guardian oversight. The crystalline builders, who had achieved post-scarcity economics through advanced manufacturing. The deep thinkers, who had solved faster-than-light communication through quantum entanglement networks. The star gardeners, who had developed sustainable interstellar colonization techniques. Each species brought new perspectives, new technologies, and new ways of thinking about galactic civilization. Commander Zephyx, now serving as liaison between the Guardian Corps and the new Human Contact Division, found himself in the middle of the most rapid expansion period in galactic history. In 5 years, the galactic community had grown from 47 member species to over 60, with more contact missions launching every month. Commander, President Chun said during one of their regular briefings, I have a question for you. What's that, Madam President? When you first arrived at Earth, you said you were here to protect us from becoming a threat to the galaxy. Zephyx's markings shifted with amusement. I remember. Do you still think humanity is a threat to the galaxy? Zephyx considered the question seriously. Humanity had indeed changed the galaxy, perhaps forever. The rigid hierarchy of the old Galactic Council had given way to a more fluid, cooperative system. The slow, careful development process had been supplemented by rapid integration protocols for advanced species. The galaxy itself was becoming more innovative, more adaptable, more human. Yes, he said finally. Humanity is absolutely a threat to the galaxy. President Chen raised an eyebrow. Oh, Zephyx's markings shifted to brilliant gold. You're a threat to the galaxy ever being boring again. President Chen laughed, a sound that Zephyx had come to associate with the kind of joy that comes from solving impossible problems. Commander, she said, I think we can live with that. As Zephyx left the meeting, he reflected on the past 5 years and the transformation they had brought to galactic civilization. The Guardians had come to Earth expecting to protect a dangerous species from itself. Instead, they had discovered a species that could protect itself while making everyone around it stronger, smarter, and more capable. The aliens had vowed to guard Earth. But, in the end, humanity had done something far more profound. They had taught the galaxy to guard itself. And, somehow, that made all the difference. The end.